be able to grow your crops. I will not allow the land to give grain and fruit and vegetables to you. No matter how hard you work, the crops you grow will always die. Instead, you must spend the rest of your life wandering, never finding a true home." Cain hadn't thought of what might happen after he killed Abel. He was learning that every choice carries consequences. Now he regretted what he'd done to his brother. After all, Abel had been Cain's best friend. He was also scared about where he would find food if he couldn't grow it. Worst of all, although God promised to protect Cain from harm, Cain was going away from God's presence. God sent him to a land east of Eden, to the land of Nod, which means wandering. In the years to come, God gave many children to Adam and Eve, and to Cain and his wife. They too had many children, who had children, who had children. Just like your great-grandfather had your grandfather, who had your father, who had you. After some time, most of the people living on earth had chosen not to live close to God anymore. They no longer taught their children to thank God for the good things He gave them. They chose to hurt and lie and do wrong, rather than be good. God looked at the people and grew very sad. He saw that they no longer even tried to do right. He saw all the pain they caused each other and themselves. And he wished he had never created people with the rest of the animals on earth. Unlike the animals, people did bad things just for the sake of hurting. God decided He would take away the lives on earth that He had created. During this time, when so many people were bad, there was one man who was different. His name was Noah. Noah often asked God's help in living his life. Noah listened for God's answers and then obeyed Him. This pleased God. God told Noah, "I'm going to put an end to all people. I will cause a huge flood to cover the land, and everyone will drown. But I will spare you and those you love. Build a big boat, and build it in the way I tell you to. Then fill it with 2 of every type of animal. Fill it with food for yourselves and them, and you will be safe." When Noah heard God's plans, he grew afraid. Yet he knew God could be trusted. So Noah did as God told him. God gave Noah the plans for making the boat, which was called an ark. It was especially designed for floating, just right for surviving a flood. As Noah built the ark, his neighbors didn't know what to think. They said, "But where's the sea? We live near the desert." Noah told them what God had said, that there was still time to say sorry to God and live good lives. But his neighbors just laughed. When the ark was finished, Noah's family climbed in, and with them went the animals and birds, creeping creatures and crawling things. What a sight it was! And the noise was enough to bring Noah's neighbors out to watch and shake their heads all over again. There were lions roaring, donkeys braying, dogs barking, birds singing, and sheep bleating. 2 by 2, the animals entered the ark, all different types and shapes and sizes. Tiny worms wiggled, horses pranced, and rabbits hopped. When all the animals were inside, God closed the door to the boat. Then it began to rain. It rained and rained. The water poured out of the skies as if the clouds contained waterfalls instead of raindrops. For 40 days and 40 nights the rains fell. Noah's ark went higher and higher, carried by the water to heights as tall as mountains. In fact, the water rose so high, the mountains disappeared underwater. As the land flooded, all the living things on earth drowned, all the people and animals and birds, for there were no dry places on which to live. The water was everywhere. As days dragged into weeks, Noah and his family felt as though they'd always been surrounded by the smells and sounds of 1,000 animals. There was no difference between night and day, since they stayed inside all the time. And the sun couldn't shine anyway, because dark rain clouds blocked its light. God did not forget his promise to Noah. When the 40 days were over, God sent a wind over the earth, and the water level started to drop. Noah woke up to darkness, as he had since the storm started. But that morning, something was different. He checked his family. They were still asleep. The animals were quiet. The ark rolled from one side to the other, as it had ever since the storm started. What was different? Then he knew. Noah could hear the waves slapping the sides of the great boat. Before that day, the sounds of rain had kept him from hearing the waves. The rains had finally stopped. Noah ran through the boat, waking everyone up. "It's over! The flood is over! Oh, let's thank God for sparing us and ending the storm!" he shouted from one end of the boat to the other. So the family gathered to give their thanks and praise to God. But it wasn't until months later that the waters went down enough for the ark to find a mountain top on which to rest. Some months later, Noah and his family went on deck for the first time. All they could see was water in all directions, broken by the tip-tops of mountains poking their way above the surface. Noah waited another month before he let a raven out to see if it could find dry land. But it was too early. Then he let a dove fly away and try to find a dry place to settle. At first, the dove came back. But a week later, Noah let the dove go again. And this time it returned with an olive leaf in its mouth. That meant there were places dry enough for trees and plants to grow. Noah waited one more week, and then sent the dove out again. But this time, it did not come back. The dove had found a place to land. Many months after the storm had started, Noah took the roof off the ark and saw that water no longer covered the ground. Nearly 2 months later, there was not even any mud left. Noah and his family had been in the ark for a very long time, and they were just as anxious as the animals to get out and start walking around again, exploring the fresh, clean earth. God said to Noah, "You, your family, and all the animals may leave the boat, go onto the land, and build homes." The animals couldn't wait to get off the ark. They tossed their heads and made even more noise leaving than they had when they got on. Shrieking and snorting, mooing and mewing, 2 by 2 they charged down the gangplank and made their way across the land. When the boat was empty, Noah and his family built a big table called an altar. There they thanked God for keeping them safe during the long time at sea. When God heard their thanks, he was so pleased, He promised never to destroy all living creatures again. He promised that as long as the earth lasted, summer would follow winter and day follow night. Then God made something very special. Using every colour, he made the first rainbow. As a sign of my promise never to flood the whole earth again, I have set my rainbow in the clouds. Noah's sons had many children, who had many children, who had many more children. The families spread out across the land, learning how to farm, raise animals, and build great cities. Because they all came from the same family, all the people spoke the same language. When strangers came from far away, anyone could understand them when they spoke. Some of the people said, "Let's build the biggest and best city ever built, so we can be famous and not have to wander anymore. We will finally have a home." The people were clever. Instead of using stones, they made bricks and stuck the bricks together with tar instead of mortar. Their walls were the strongest and highest ever. And they were very proud of themselves, choosing not to thank God for the materials they used for building. "We are so clever," they said. Inside the city was a huge tower. The people thought they were such good builders, they could make that tower as high as the sky. When God saw what the people were trying to do, he knew he must stop them, or they would soon think of themselves as gods instead of people. They would be too proud. So he mixed up their language. The people no longer spoke one language, but many. If one man said, "Hello," the other man didn't know what he'd said. He thought he might be saying, "Could I borrow your tools?" It was hard to get anything done, let alone finish a great tower. The city they never finished building was called Babel, which means mixed up, because there the Lord mixed up the language of the whole world. Then God caused the people to scatter to many different parts of the earth. So now there were people living everywhere, and there was no way at all for them to plot and scheme and grow proud of themselves. Many years later there lived a man named Abram. He and his wife Sarai lived in the land of Haran. They had many sheep, cattle, goats and camels. Abram and Sarai were happy. Although Abram and Sarai stored their things in tents, they often slept outside. Nighttime in the desert helped to bring God very close. They could feel his presence when the sky stretched like an endless blanket of stars. Often on such nights, Abram and Sarai wished for a child. But the years went by, and none came. One star-filled desert night, when the creatures of the dark were singing and Sarai lay asleep at his side, Abram heard God speaking to him. Abram walked a short way into the desert. There God told Abram some amazing things. "Abram, I will make you into a great nation, and I will take care of you, and all people everywhere will be blessed because of you." Abram lay shaking in the sand. He couldn't believe his ears. Why had God chosen him? The Lord told Abram to leave his home at Haran. Even though Abram didn't know where the Lord would lead him and his family, He obeyed God. He trusted that God would